How's it going, guys? This is Kyle Fonger from Vapor Hut, driven by you, fueled by vapor. And today, I'm gonna be showing you how to do a build. Unless you guys follow me on Instagram or are a frequent customer at Vapor Hut, you have probably never seen this build before. I call it the Transformer build. Flavor, vapor production, this coil is a monster. Not only is this a very artistic build and does it look beautiful in your RDA, but this is a build that is actually pragmatic. The vapor production's awesome, the flavor's awesome. All around, this is an awesome build, and they're gonna be coming in right around 0.2 ohms each. So if you wanna do a dual, like I have here in my El Cabron, you can. Your total resistance is gonna be around 0.1. But if you wanna do a single build and really utilize your juice wells or whatever, this thing can do it. Basically what you're gonna need today is a drill, some 36 gauge Kanthal, some 0.8 millimeter flat Kanthal or ribbon wire, 26 gauge nichrome, and 24 gauge nichrome, and a variety of tools. Alright, so the first thing you want to do is take your 26 gauge nichrome and pull off about 10 inches, 11 inches or so. I'm going to be showing you how to make one transformer coil today. So with your 26 gauge nichrome, you're going to cut that in half. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your needle nose and loop one end. You can see there it's looped. Do that to both. And the reason why I do this is because it seems to hold better in the chuck. If you don't, then the wire will just spin, and if you're pulling on it at all, it will come right out. So with that little bend in there, the teeth of the chuck can grab it more easily. Then, because you're using this 26 gauge as the core of a Clapton, you want it to be perfectly straight. So the way to do that is take those needle nose or some pliers of some kind, and you're gonna clamp the end, and you're gonna spin this wire for about 4 to 5 seconds. And when I let go, she's straight. Alright, then you're gonna do the same thing to your other piece of 26 gauge nichrome. Hold one end and about 5 seconds. And she's straight. So after you've straightened your 26 gauge nichrome, what you're going to want to do is pull off about 12 feet of 36 gauge Kanthal, and that'll be in 2 6-foot segments. So because I'm a little over 6 feet tall, I just take this, spread my arms all the way out, and then I hold the one end and I cut it there. Do that a second time. Alright, so you're going to take one of your 6-foot lengths of 36 gauge Kanthal, have it just go between your legs, the excess, and with one end, you're going to take one of your 26 gauge strands and you're going to wrap about 2 to 3 inches around that loop that you made. So just like that, with your 36 gauge coming off the bottom. You're going to slip that into your drill's chuck. Now if you've never done a Clapton before, I recommend starting out with 24 gauge as the core and 32 gauge as the wire you're wrapping around it. It's much easier to practice with those 2 gauges, so this will take a little bit of practice for you to get this down. But when you're ready, go onto your 26 gauge with your 36 on the outside, and you'll be able to make this transformer. So with your 36 gauge coming off the bottom, you're basically going to be pinching that 36 gauge right under the 26 and guiding it along. And if your 36 gauge looks like it's too spread apart, you just want to slow down how fast you're guiding it. And if it looks too tight or you start to see it double, triple up on the same wire, then you want to go faster. So you'll get into kind of a rhythm and you'll be able to figure it out. But it will take some practice, so just a warning. So you're gonna start off slow, let a couple of wraps get around there. My elbow caught a little bit on the table, so at the end we're gonna see it's a little more spaced, but that's okay. Because what we can do is after you take your wire off, you can go ahead and squeeze together the spaces that weren't as tight as the other spaces. All right, then we're gonna take our second strand of 36 gauge and do the same thing as we did before. We're gonna wrap it around our looped end, just enough so it's secure. Stick that in our chuck. Always make sure your 36 gauge isn't under your foot or under the leg of your chair, because then it'll catch when you get to that point and mess up your wire. Alright, so let's do it. And if you ever find your fingers starting to move up into the wire, just stop and readjust your fingers, and then start slow and ramp it up to the speed you're at. One thing I've also found is if you use your thumbnail to pinch the wire, it'll kind of eat away at your thumbnail a little bit, but it does slide better when it's like that than when it's in between your finger pads. Alright, there's our second Clapton. So once you have both of your Claptons made, you're going to take out about 1.5 feet of your 0.8 millimeter flat canthal or your ribbon wire. And you don't have to use 0.8 millimeter. When I first did builds similar to this, I was using 0.5. So in terms of how it affects the coil and the end result, doesn't seem to have a huge bearing. It's more aesthetic than it is practical in terms of what width flat canthal you're using. So now once you have your 2 Claptons and your ribbon wire cut, what you're going to want to do is place those 2 Claptons right next to each other, and just like you did with the 36 gauge canthal, you're going to wrap the ribbon wire about 2-3 inches. You're going to wrap that around the 2 ends of the Claptons. Alright, so it's going to look just like that. And you're going to stick that whole piece in your drill chuck. And try and make sure your Claptons both remain straight or parallel to one another. If one's really bending up, make sure you bend it back before you start. But for the most part, the wrapping process of the ribbon wire should pull them together. So now this is going to be a lot faster than the wrapping the Claptons. You're basically be pulling as you run the drill. So you're not really guiding as much as you are pulling. So I'm gonna get it. And you don't want to leave a lot of space in between your flat canthal wraps, because once you're done, as you wrap this coil around your drill bit to form your coil, it's actually going to separate the flat canthal and expose the 2 inner Claptons. So don't worry, you're not just covering up the art that you made with the 2 Claptons. You will be able to see them in the end result. And it looks like we could have used a little less flat canthal, at about 7 inches left. So maybe about 1 foot is all you need of that. And there's the most difficult part of the transformer build. So once you've completed your transformer wire, it should look something like this. As you can see, I left a little bit of space in between the ribbon wire. And once we wrap our coil, you'll be able to really see those Claptons well. I'm going to be wrapping this coil around a 2.4 millimeter drill bit, or screwdriver in this case. So take the end with the loops, and that's the end that's going to be wrapping around the screwdriver bit. And because the wire is slightly twisted, as you can see, you're going to want to make sure you start with it flat, just like that, and then hold the edge right there against the side of the screwdriver. So it's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And go ahead and pull your leads straight. Looks pretty good. If you have any parts that are twisting, what you can do is take your needle nose and you can basically just grab the wire and untwist it. So like right here, we can grab that and we can untwist it. So it's nice and flat. Here you can see what I mean, that even when that ribbon wire is wrapped tightly around the Claptons, once you wrap that coil around your bit, it does open up so you can see your Claptons still. So once your transformer is wrapped, you're going to take about 6-7 inches 24 gauge nichrome, and you're going to slip one end under far lead, or the closest lead. What you're going to do is you're going to pinch those down. Now you're just going to pop your 24 gauge into the gaps of the transformer. Alright, the only last thing to do is slide your coil off gently, flip it around. Straighten these leads out. Now you're going to take that 24 gauge and wrap one more wrap around the outside. So basically the 24 gauge nichrome is enclosing the transformer coil. Alright, what you can do, clip one side short and leave the other side longer. So I'm just going to clip it where that 24 gauge ends. There's your transformer coil. Looks pretty awesome. Alright, so once you have your crazy transformer coil built, go ahead and install this puppy. Alright, so before I get started, I'm going to make sure I lock my box mod. If you don't have a lock on your mod, just make sure that you take your batteries out. So you don't want to burn yourself while you're installing a coil. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and just close this post hole since we are doing a single build today. I actually prefer this transformer build as a single coil setup rather than a dual. Seems like a dual, just the ohms are too low, it gets a little too hot, kind of spits into your mouth. So I'm just going to do a single today. Alright, so once you have two of your post holes open, and this is why we cut those leads at separate lengths, so we can slide one in and then get the second one in. And with post holes like these on the El Cabron, you won't have any trouble whatsoever. So once your coil is snug in place, you got both leads coming out the other end. What you're gonna do, so once you have your coil tight, you're gonna take your Allen key or your screwdriver or whatever kind of bits your RDA uses, and you're gonna tighten those down. And once one is snug, make sure you go to the other one, and then we can go back and make sure they're really tight. We just don't want our coil to move. Right. Alright, those are very tight. So I'm going to go ahead and trim the extra wire on the back side of my posts. Alright, then you can mess with fitting that coil in there. Right now that coil is going to catch on the top cap, so what I want to do is I want to push it over and angle it if need be, just by pulling the negative post side of the coil, just pulling that up. One thing you want to make sure that doesn't happen is your coil rests against the center post. You do not want that to happen. So if you do find yourself having to angle it, make sure you pull out away from the center post to ensure you're not going to get a short. So that looks pretty good, nothing's touching there. Let's fire her up. Okay. getting there. Oh yeah. Make sure she's firing from the center out. See how she... Looks pretty good. Alright, I'm going to let her cool off and then we can go ahead and wick her. And again, I'm going to lock my device so that as I'm putting the wick in there, it doesn't accidentally fire and burn my wick on me. I'm going to be using Japanese organic cotton. The brand of this particular kind of Japanese cotton is called Shiseido, and I'll put a link in the description as to where you can find that. So what I like to do is just trim this to fit, and it's about 1/3 of the sheet. And then so that it's nice and even, so it's nice and even, I pull off both sides of the cotton, that paperish kind of material, and then I like to taper one end. So I'm just going to trim it like that, and then I just roll it in my fingers. And slip it through your coil. And while you're pulling it through, it helps to actually spin the back end. And once it's right about the middle of your cotton sheet, I like to unwind it on both ends and pull it back and forth just a little bit. You want it to be snug. And then based on how deep the juice wells of your RDA are, you can trim your cotton accordingly. So I'm going to trim right about there. And right about here. Take this little screwdriver and use that to just fold my cotton. Stick it right under there. You want to have the whole coil exposed, top and bottom. And that's a lighter wicking than I normally do, but should work just fine. I'm going to be dripping some of our Vapor Hut Pink Starburst today. I can't get over how much I love this flavor. Really saturate this because this coil gets hot. And then with any coil, once you saturate the cotton and the coil for the first time, you want to fire it a little bit. That'll help pull the juice inside of the coil to prevent there being a burnt spot in there. Alright, she's juiced. And she's chucking. Close my airflow off, so I just have one of these rings open. Always put your airflow on the side of your coil when you're doing single coil. And see. Oh yeah. So I said this build was going to come out around 0.2. It is a 0.17. So if you use this build in a dual coil setup, you're looking at a 0.08, 0.09, basically in that range. So my first go at this coil, I used 28 gauge Kanthal inside of those Claptons rather than the 26 nichrome. And I found the resistance was a bit too high. We were looking at 0.28 ohms per coil. And so dual coil would have been fine. I actually didn't have anything at the time that I could fit both of those coils into to run a dual coil. So what I decided to do was switch out that 28 Kanthal for the 26 gauge nichrome, thereby lowering the resistance and lowering the ramp up time. If you're using this in single coil mode, definitely use the 26 gauge nichrome. That 0.17 is a perfect hit. Now this is to each their own. This is my subjective opinion on the coil. I like a little bit warmer of a vape. If you're gonna do dual coil, that 0.08, 0.09 is a little low, it's a little hot. So I would switch out that 26 gauge nichrome for the 28 Kanthal if you do plan on doing this build in dual coil setup. But as you can see, single coil, this thing's chucking. And the flavor is amazing. I beg you guys, try this thing out. The flavor is awesome on it. So there's the transformer build. Talk about having a piece of artwork in your hand. Man. She just chucks too. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this tutorial on how to do the transformer build. Try it out. Let me know what you think. Everyone I've ever done this build for has loved it, and I'd be really interested to know what you guys out there on YouTube, what you think of this build. This has been Kyle from Vapor Hut, driven by you, fueled by vapor. Have a great day, guys.